Right. Hello and welcome to our sales funnel optimization webinar. And I'm really excited to have all of you here. Let's introduce our guest speakers. First, we have Devin Kelley, VP of Marketing at Spreedly. Devin brings a rich blend of marketing expertise, spanning performance marketing to strategic roles in B2B and B2C companies. His recent venture at a scaling fintech startup highlights his versatile and impactful approach to marketing. Joining him is Chris Gaebler, the CMO of Sonrai Security. With over 2 decades in high-tech marketing, Chris's career encompasses leadership roles at companies like Netscout and Kaspersky Lab. I hope I'm getting the name right. His customer-centric approach has been instrumental in driving market growth and enhancing ROI. And leading our session today is our host, Priyanka Jain, CEO of Airing. Priyanka is a powerhouse in data analytics and AI with a passion for empowering businesses with data-driven decision-making. Her leadership in Airing's SWOT data science team has been instrumental in tackling growth enterprises and startups' complex business challenges. Now, a little bit about Airing. We are at the forefront of transforming businesses through data science and helping growth stage startups to Fortune 500 companies make smarter decisions using their data. The intent of this webinar is to share proven and actionable strategies with C-suite executives of growth stage enterprises and startups. This session is curated specifically to equip startup C-suite with the tools and knowledge to optimize their sales funnel effectively. In today's Airing's Data Matters webinar series, we're delving into everything from defining your sales funnel metrics to optimizing conversions, nurturing leads, and finding out friction points. So let's get started and hand it over to our host, Priyanka.
Thank you so much, Aditi. Welcome, Chris and Devin. So excited to talk about this topic. Gosh, what a time we've been having. 2023 has been a really rough year for all of us. When we can't bring in customers or can't bring them in cost effectively, we have to tighten our belts. Everything is downstream of that. So customer and sales and revenue is just so important. So I wanted to talk today, specifically given your guys' background, more on sales and marketing funnel. I know you guys have very extensive background on marketing as well as sales, and this whole funnel coming together from, like a company, product market fit, and then a company learning or customer learning about the company and the product, and then to all the way to, yeah, I want this product. Here's my credit card. So let's talk about that. What are Chris? Maybe we'll start with you. If you can start out, how do you look at that funnel? What are the different stages? How do you look at metrics at these different stages? Are there differences in industries as you look at these funnels?
It's a great topic. I think, we keep using the funnel metaphor, and I think it's still useful, but it has certainly been challenged by many observers who think of the customer journey as not so linear. But still, we use this funnel, and I think it's helpful for discussions like this. But I think we all acknowledge that there's many dimensions to a path from learning about a company to going forward. I think marketing typically was held accountable for the top of the funnel, the sort of first engagement and the leads. But increasingly, conversations in my world, and I'm interested to hear what you and Devin say, have shifted to like the closed won stage actually, and then working back up the funnel. And even this concept of the bow tie funnel, where you go all the way through a closed won sale and then you expand your customer engagement afterwards. And marketing is actually very involved in the post-sale expansion stage. And I would say, if I were to prioritize where, we focus, it's probably first at closed won, the first sale, just because, getting leads at the top of the funnel that don't go all the way through doesn't help anybody. And then I probably think about like, what are the sources of those opportunities to get to a closed won sale? And then I probably think about like what the expansion opportunity is. Some would argue that you should focus on the customers first and then start with the new customers. But there's almost always pressure for marketers to make sure the pipeline has, candidates who can actually become a closed won customer. And so I would say that's the stage and that's the sort of process that we prioritize.
Starting from starting when you're saying, I want to understand it more, when you're saying you're starting from closed won, which is sort of like, if you think about still the funnel, bottom of the funnel going up, what you're saying is you're trying to understand what kind of customers we are closing and then building
exactly. I prioritize those because I think if you get 100 opportunities or 100 leads and there's no closed one, no one's happy. And if you get 50 closed won opportunities and only at 100 leads, your conversion rate's 50%, everybody's happy. It probably indicates that you're onto something and you should expand what you're doing. But the calibration is to really understand why those prospects made it all the way through to a purchase, and really have the whole marketing team understand that, versus having your marketing team focus in their area, whether it's an event or a digital campaign, on just quantity of leads at the top, number of scans at a booth, or number of visits to a web page. Like, someone should track those, but no board that I've met in the last 5 years actually wants to hear what those numbers are.
It's good lead. Don't give me just lead, good lead or qualified, and whatever way you want to define your highest probability closed won.
That's right. That's right.
So that's great. How do you look at this, Devin, from your marketing lens as well as marketing sales lens?
I think the opportunity to reverse engineer, as Chris was saying, like, from the success you've had back to what worked and what didn't, is obviously a great place to start. Oftentimes the case, particularly in the startup world, is you've got to ask yourself the question, are the customers that you've had the customers that you want moving forward? And oftentimes, if you're launching new products or you've been through a pivot or change pricing significantly, that can be really tough for you to look back and say, hey, what worked for me in the past may actually be a bit of a red herring in terms of what you should be doing moving forward. So and I think that first question, like, is what we've done in the past something we want to replicate? Is kind of the follow-on question for, like, we have data to support a process, but is that process something we want to replicate? Yeah. And that becomes a strategic question very, very quickly to help you weight how much importance you might put on the data and the multiple steps of the funnel. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say this is a nuance to, we were kind of going to fundamentals, but you guys both have just jumped in the deep end already. The nuance is, first know your funnel, first know how your path is. But you're saying, yeah, listen, we are winning them, but we don't want to win them. Margins are low for them, or they're like, the expansion is low. And I know, Devin, my time with Spreedly preceded a bit of yours, but this was exactly what Spreedly did, going from mid-market to higher up, because it just was like not, the ROI wasn't there, right? So this is a journey. This is just the evolution of any company when they're like, we at least have close wins, but is it the right customer? But if I take a few steps back for both of you, in the most simplistic term, how do you look at this funnel, and what is an effective way of looking for a CMO or CSO, CRO? What's an effective way to even look at the performance of their sales and marketing teams and say, hey, we are doing well, or we are not?
I guess I would say the most useful view of the funnel, and whether you want to look at that past an initial conversion or not. Depends on the business, but I think it's probably like a quick diagnostic tool, right? If you lay a funnel out in any of the numerous ways it can be laid out across different KPI or visualization methods, it should give you as a leader or as management an opportunity to quickly understand what's working and what's not, and potentially the places to dig into to focus your time on either asking better questions or looking to solve those problems yourself.
So like basically starting potentially from awareness, like you said, Chris, that people are coming into your funnel some way, your website, your events, or whatever else. So awareness and then consideration. You have some ways of tracking whether they are considering you, and then potentially a trial or a demo or a trial sandbox. Like we have again for Spriggly that I'm familiar with, and then further down, listen, I have a handshake. This is something which works. Do we do monthly? Do we do annual? What are the contracts looking like? So these are sort of different stages. When you are looking at it, how do you know it's good or bad, Chris?
I look a lot at ROI, and I look at how much you're expecting from a given activity. So I have some benchmarks either from our prior experience at Sonrai or from other places where I try to understand what the value of that activity is. At the end of the day, you're managing resources, and as we all feel, they're always limited, and either by time or money, you have to figure out how to use your limited resources the best. And so I look at what part of the funnel is that action that costs me money and people time going to impact. And I try to understand what a useful threshold or benchmark for good versus bad is, and maybe even amazing, but even if it's just good or bad. And I ask the team to identify that before we even really invest in it, maybe even before we decide to invest in it. So that, if your goal at an event is to create, 100 meaningful conversations that could generate 50 real opportunities in your sales pipe or whatever the numbers are, and you get substantially less than that, it could be the event was a bad idea, or that your team's deployment or activity was bad, but like you had a view of what good or bad was before. And and when I look at what the investments are needed to move enough opportunities through the pipeline and beyond, I try to calibrate it based on what my expected ROI is. But the hard thing is, I think, training marketers who are used to getting stuff done to ask that question, what does good look like for them? And the other hard thing, that's hard to your team. And the hard thing to your management is you can have a couple failures if you've learned from it. Like if you're, you didn't hit your ROI number, but you learned a lot, that's okay. If someone's continually doing programs that aren't very valuable, you may have an issue. But the hard thing with management is to let yourself invest in some opportunities where the ROI could come. But the hard one for me is to make sure the team knows what good ROI looks like from an activity.
So you're looking at ROI as one of the key metrics, which is, I think it's a business metric for sure, even besides sales and marketing, right? Like ROI, we are spending so much money and resources, and how much return are we getting? And then also, as people are moving through different stages, I know it's not linear often, but different stages, conversion rates, do we have significantly higher or lower drop-offs? I think one thing that I've seen many of our clients struggle with is, again, going back to what's good or what's bad, because the truth is that there is nothing 100%. There's no 100% conversion. There's no 100% like in any stage. What is a good way that you have seen, Devin, in ways of benchmarking or comparing? Is it like, okay, let's compare it to last quarter? Is that it? Or is there another way of looking at industries? Is there another way of saying this is good or this is not good? This has opportunity for improvement.
Yeah, there are a lot of published benchmarks out there for the platform that you're in. If it's a marketing automation platform, many publish, annual reviews or benchmarks on emails or conversion rates throughout. But I think, somewhat to Chris's point, if you have a team that's used to getting things done, and maybe not stepping back from the data and digging into the problem that's left to be solved, if you're looking to improve a conversion rate, I tend to coach people into digging deeper and putting yourself in the position of the customer or the prospect. So often you're asking someone to make a step from one step in the funnel to another, and if you or your team don't know what the call to action is that brings them from one step to the other, how are you going to improve that? If you don't know the time it's going to take to fill out that form, or what that offer is, and if that's appealing, a lot of this gets back to old school 4 Ps of marketing that really moves people through a conversion process. And a good benchmark oftentimes for how well aligned a marketing team is with the rest of the organization can be how much time they're spending listening to customers. And oftentimes now that can happen through things like Gong or other call recording tools, instead of riding along on sales calls like you would years ago. But really understanding why are people not converting in this process? Is your ask too difficult? Is your form too long? Are you offering somebody something they would never want at this time? Are you using the same schedule a demo call to action from the time someone meets you through every step of the process, right? There are a lot of reasons why this can't work, and data is the diagnostic. It's not the solution here. So you're never gonna outnumber yourself through what the improved conversion rate is. You're going to kind of think your way through it as a potential customer yourself.
I think that's the new, I love that position of putting yourself between the prospect and the process. I think it's a great way to think about it. And I think one of the emerging skills that marketers need is that ability to interpret. So with the rise of AI tools and all of this, there's a lot of things marketers used to have to do that they don't have to do as much now, because there's some tools out there that simplify it. But when it comes to data, I come from a market research background many years ago, and I always thought there was 3 steps to it. One is what is the data? So can you get good data? Not everyone knows what that looks like, but finding good data is useful. And then there's a second step of so what? What does it mean? That curiosity to really interpret what it means, I think is a poor area for many marketers, because you get the data and you jump to the third step, which is now what? So you get some data back from some activity, which is low conversion rate, and then you jump to now what? We'll do a different event. And you skip that middle step, which is why did we get poorer results, or why did we get great results?
Yeah.
And that interpretation skill, I think, is lost sometimes. And I think really good marketers, do take a step back. They ask that question. They may ask a customer or a prospect or a salesperson what happened. And inside that nugget is a different interpretation of the data that can lead to a much better next action. And so I think what Devin was articulating there was, that curiosity about the data, which you need good data to start with. But you then have to have that ability to interpret. And if your job is getting stuff done, how well you do it isn't always a criteria. But I think going forward, a marketing must-have skill is that kind of thing. And so I think even when we interview, we try to interview for their curiosity quotient, not just their ability to get things done, which I view as kind of a table stakes.
No, absolutely. We have at Airing, we also have an academy, and we train people what we call citizen analyst. So marketers are a citizen analyst, and the process that we are teaching, it's called it's the same process we use whether we do AI projects with API or data science or analytics or data engineering. It's called BADIR, BADIR, and it's an acronym for these 5 steps. Starts with business question. What is it that you're trying to learn? And in this context of the conversation we just had, the question would be, where do good leads come from, for example? Not even from data. It starts from question. And then the A stands for analysis plan, which is, I think, Devin, you were talking about curiosity. It's hypotheses. Where do I believe it comes from? What are my ideas? What do marketers and sales people, what are they seeing on the field? All those hypotheses is what guides the next step, which is data collection and then insights, the so what that you're talking about. I have the data now based on my hypotheses. I've analyzed it. And so what? Like, what is this telling me? And what's the impact of this insight? And if I were to change it from X to Y, I don't do this event and I do another event. Now that I know this event has this, what was my expected ROI? What is my expected change, my delta? And thereby the recommendation, which is now what? Like, now I can actually make that decision because I have actually stack ranked I've done A did this, and now I'm proposing B or C or D, and here's the stack rank of potential impact. So I absolutely agree with you that marketers need to get more, not only just digital savvy, but like data literacy, like having those skills of what's my question? What are my hypotheses? How do I believe I can improve? And the question might be, I need to improve my marketing ROI. How do I do that? Right? Like, and that's kind of where it starts from. That's the fundamental. But that's cool.
Framework. I think the hypotheses are a cool thing because I frankly think if you have those before you start to look for data, it helps narrow the data.
Absolutely.
There's such a data explosion now. You can start with all these dashboards and data tables, and if you don't have a hypothesis, you can just drown in information and not have a useful perspective. That's good.
And I think, Devin, yesterday you were also saying that data doesn't, and I'm rephrasing it because it's a quote from my book, Behind Every Good Decision, that data doesn't speak, it only responds. So expecting to have a sheet of Excel sheets or Tableau dashboards and then expecting to look at it and saying it's going to speak to you, it doesn't. That means we need to meaningfully set up the analysis or the insight generating mechanism by asking meaningful question, like what is it good, where is good lead coming from? A very different question than how do I optimize my ROI? Even though they may sound the same, they're actually two different questions. And then actually figuring out ROI. Devin may define ROI one way, Chris may define it another way. What is R? Fully loaded, not people, or sorry, R meaning, I want fully loaded. I just want to take the net, or I. What is my I? Is it, do I count people? Do I not count people? Do I only count marketing dollars? So you really, really need to spend time on refining that question and figuring out what is it that we're really trying to solve before we go down the path of data, because data is kind of like you said, Chris, it's like Pacific Ocean. You can swim all day long and drown before you'll get anything out of it. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. In the early stages of funnel, where awareness, brand awareness, consideration, do you guys have any tips and tricks, strategies that you've seen that has worked? How do we make those early stages of funnel more effective? In one, targeting, like you said, right people, like the right good leads, and secondly, in moving them through.
So I think the top of the funnel is probably the most challenging in terms of building good questions and then ultimately hypotheses to work against, because oftentimes the data you're looking for isn't yours there, right? You're looking for people who have questions or challenges in their business, and then you're looking to answer them, right? The idea of brand awareness is people don't become aware of brands before they have problems those brands can solve, right? People aren't excited about Ford without realizing they have to go somewhere in a car, right? Like there's always a problem to be solved, and you have to understand that problem first. And the challenging thing about that may be that that person not being in your funnel yet, understanding the total addressable market or understanding the jobs to be done, or whichever framework you want to use for kind of matching value with market fit, probably doesn't directly tie into the funnel that you have today. So finding proxies out there that help you understand the problems that people are experiencing and how you might be able to solve them becomes matching kind of two disparate data sets. And there's a lot of ways to look at that, from you can look at Google search traffic for certain topics and say, hey, this is a good proxy for the market's readiness for a solution here. So if lots of people are asking this question, I can solve this problem, so I can provide a good answer to this question. That's a good place for me to go play. But you're marrying those kind of two disparate data sets up, and then having to kind of go through the economics to define if that makes sense for you or not. But there's a lot of other places to go to kind of understand the market readiness and understanding the problems that people are experiencing that your solution in the market may solve. And oftentimes the kind of earlier you are in a startup world, the less data there is to lean on there, right? Because maybe it's an unknown solution or a newer solution to market. So oftentimes, finding the best proxies you can, or finding folks who are willing to kind of, share those stories with you, or, dig into, even older school customer research or customer discovery sessions, or, you can even look at churn reports and stuff like that of your existing customers to understand why people are unhappy or where you're missing the mark. Can be helpful ways to understand, why is someone facing a problem that we're not solving as of yet. And I think that's probably the biggest rub at the top of the funnel, and that this isn't one dashboard for you. There isn't a clear, one data point to the next, and that's probably the art matched with science of marketing.
Yeah, and Devin, I think you were saying that I was thinking awareness, but you're actually going a few steps up and saying total addressable market, like before even product market fit and total addressable market, before people actually learn, like you said, they have a need for driving, going from point A to point B. How many of such exist, and what is it currently not being solved? And then going down and saying how many are actually aware of us as a solution, and further down. Any further thoughts, Chris, on those early stages?
Just pragmatically, tactically, we've moved probably more focus and attention into the digital world from the face-to-face world. If you can split the sort of marketing activities between the two. I think that was accelerated with COVID, where face-to-face wasn't possible, and has continued. I know that events have come back and things like that, but I think one of the reasons is, there's research out there from various sources. The latest I heard was from 6 Sense, an intent-based platform, where they say 70% of the customer journey happens before a customer wants to talk to a salesperson at all. And while I know that could happen through word of mouth or a recommendation from a peer or an analyst, I think a lot of it happens with online research, as Devin was saying, like you look at search terms and things like that. And so much research from so many people in a buying team is happening digitally. Being present digitally matters. They also, 6 Sense also had a stat that said 80+% of the time, the first vendor they actually speak to is the one they choose, that all the other vendors are sort of secondary, tertiary. And so that was interesting, like how do you become that first call that they take? And so there is a lot of pressure to get that top of the funnel mix correct, which could include brand, by the way. We talked about the pipeline, and it puts a lot of pressure on demand gen activities and conversion rate generating activities. But I would say a lot of the time, salespeople, including chief revenue officers, really want the brand out there, so that there's a chance that your company is the first one called, and that when your sales team talks to a prospect, they've heard of you and know what you stand for. And so there's a little bit of that mixture of like, how much do you invest in brand that goes into this discussion of top of funnel. But those are, and then now within the top of the funnel, there's good data. There's probably better data for digital activities than there is for non-digital. So it doesn't mean it's always, there's more data. I wouldn't say it's always good data.
Yeah. This reminds me, I was moving from Bay Area, Silicon Valley, to Austin last year. And, I hadn't moved for like, I don't know, 17, 18 years. So didn't know about the movers. So I was just like, started doing my research, keyword research, who moves cars, how do people move stuff, like movers. And so true, I called, whoever came in first, I called the first person. And this is really the first vendor. I forget now who that was, but basically they said, yeah, this is how it works. This is the rental. This is the, their whole, the way they structure the thing. And I said, oh, that's great. Can you send me the quote? And, I'm just taking quotes right now. And he said, oh, why would you, like he kind of convinced me because I really had no time. And he's like, and I ended up like 10 minutes more. I ended up just saying, okay, go ahead. And he told me, I never got to call those 3 other people or 3 other companies I was meaning to. And realistically speaking, nobody has time, neither do your customers. And they're like, and that probably explains why the first vendor gets in. And so the bigger the brand or the easier. That research, I think I did already my research that these companies exist between, Sunnyvale to Austin, and then this is between for the car, and all of that. So I think that's a very, very fair point. One of the things, and I wanted your perspective on it, this is something we have seen with our customers, especially Series A, B, C, like early companies, when they start out, they're doing a lot of things. They're everything to everybody. So the use cases or ICP and use cases are not very well defined. And what I've noticed is, and through our early work, we've done a lot of pricing and packaging work, as well as this whole funnel optimization work. What I've noticed is the companies who tend to have only narrow focus, which is we only do this, and keep that focus to 1 to 2 things on their website. Which is where probably once people land on your site, that's where they're doing the research. I would say the 70% that they were quoting probably has some percentages outside trust radius or whatever else outside of Google, and then coming to your site and saying, really, is this a viable solution for me? And I've noticed that those who have, 1 or 2, like very specific offering, and they're very focused, and there isn't in their funnel or in their like call to action, it's very simple. The simple seems to get better results to conversion. And when I've looked at this and when we have helped, my hypothesis has been that it doesn't create this decision paralysis in them. And you're either a fit or you're not, which means those who are not a fit are not even going to your funnel. Your top of the funnel is going to be small because people are not even filling that form or whatever else. But once they are in, it's just you're known for only 1 or 2 things. How do you guys react to that? Especially because early stages, you don't even know yourself yet, like series.
There's an old marketing quote where, this goes back to like brand and positioning, but if you're all things to all people, you're nothing to no one, right? And I think this goes back to, if you're a prospect, nobody wants to hop on the phone with a salesperson and say, tell me what you kind of do here, because I think it might work for me, right? Like you feel like a smart buyer in that process. So I think being clear about the problem that a customer is facing and the solution that you provide, and the more clarity that's there, the smoother that funnel process is going to go. And a lot of this comes back to discipline, both like in your messaging and your offer, and then also in your criteria of moving people through a funnel, that like the process of doing so means, people are kind of figuring each other out along the way. You're figuring out the customer, and if you can help, and the customer's figuring out if you have a solution that adds value to them. And what you're seeing in every step in that funnel in terms of data is that either working or not. And being able to suss that out, it becomes much easier if your offerings are simpler, right? And some of this goes back to how early stage you are and like how much research needs to be done. And some of this is the maturity of a business, that once, a business is more established and it fits into a clear category, particularly in the digital or the software space. Like once Gartner's created the category and the competitive space is clear, it's kind of, there's a process at that point, right? There's, a certain amount of market share. Everybody could take a certain set of that. You're competing on features and function and maybe pricing. Prior to that, though, you've got to work through, like, do people understand what I offer and how that comes about and the problems that people face? And that's a much more difficult space to work through, but it's much easier to work through that with clarity in what your offering is on the top of that funnel versus we offer any number of things. And then you have to kind of work through that in the expensive way, which is, really high churn rates throughout your funnel and with your sales team.
So what I'm hearing from you, Devin, is that you agree wholeheartedly from the old. Chris, any pushback to this? Anything you see contrary to it?
I think in our world, I completely agree that a focused approach as a marketer and as a salesperson is better. Where I see a defocused approach happen is usually where something's wrong. And it's usually a signal that there's a problem. Like, we don't feel good with option A, so we're also going to option B and offer option B and C and hope for the best. And you get offer sprawl, and you end up having a very defocused process that hurts your sales team and the buyer. I would say that you can. I was thinking about this as Devin was talking. Ford originally had a very focused product, and General Motors had a very defocused, like, huge line of offerings, and they both succeeded. I'm actually wondering why GM was so successful if focus actually helps. And I was reminded of, like, Tesla had a very focused offering with electric cars for high-end buyers, and then they diversified after they were successful. So I think generally the rule is it helps to focus. And this comes back to the pipeline is very expensive if you don't have a clear position. That's why I think, like, growth marketers need a great product marketing position, whatever the team configuration is, in order for the pipeline work to be successful. I agree.
That's very true. So that brings us to ICPs and segmentation. What is ICP being ideal customer profile and segmenting them into? So is there any, going back to you, Chris, what's your thought on how do you find those out, and what are, is there like a rule of thumb, X number of ICPs, and how do, what are your thoughts on that?
I think the smaller and more clear the ICP is, the better. Again, back to focus, back to the solution you offer for a narrow group of people, and then you can expand it. And I think the way you identify your ICP is through conversations. Sometimes you can get some data quantitatively through surveys and market data, but I think the real value is understanding that emotional pain point that you can address as they go through their journey. And you really want to understand how to define the person who has those pains and gains that they can get. A little bit back to Devin's comment about, like, you as a marketer want to put yourself between the prospect and the process. How do you really understand that prospect well? And if the definition of the ideal customer profile is too broad, it's too ambiguous. Everybody wants it to be bigger because everybody wants the addressable market to be bigger and you to become, multi-billion-dollar company, which is awesome. But, like, it doesn't help to be too diluted in your definition. And I find, back to the curiosity point, you need to have a real open mind as a marketer to really listen for who your ICP is, because someone who you may think it was is actually a bad indicator. And that whole crossing the chasm concept comes to play, where you can get someone who's eager for the new technology, but they're not representative of the market you can actually sell it to. So I think, good survey, good anthropological research helps to get great personas, and then you solidify and market to it.
Yeah, and I think, Chris, you were kind of assuming that ICP work early on, right? But you can, I think, to me, ICP work is ongoing, right? Like 4 years down the line, you're still, and then, bubbling your customers again and saying, where are they falling? So that's where it'll go back to data and saying, in my current database, as I'm converting close when, who are these people? And, like, seeing where that segments fall in. And I think one of the where we found value is when you do that and you start seeing, listen, this segment is really small but really high growth, moves through your cycle, through your sales cycle very quickly, versus this one is large but it's not growing, and they stay in our system 9 months versus, you know, others. So all of those dynamics starts playing, which for you to help, like, you know, maybe I don't want to focus on this versus the other one, and so on and so forth. So they're like, I think ICP is a sort of not just do it once and we are done kind of, but it's more evolving year over year or cycle over cycle as the company or the product matures to you know, what the ideal customer profile. Any thoughts from you, Devin?
No, I agree with Chris on much of that. I think, you know, an ideal customer profile is really just a business level view of a collection of personas, right? Like your group of personas make up the ideal customer. And, you know, if you took that further down the sales path, you know, you get into sales conversations and sales starts using terms like, you know, who's our champion, right? And we want to understand which persona is often the champion in bringing, you know, change into an organization. And, you know, understanding all of those elements are important in that process. And that often is kind of anthropological on the front end. But once you kind of begin to understand that, you can start to build ideal customer profiles, say, hey, in this buying process, we know we need a product person, a finance person, and the change agent is going to be the product person, but the approval is going to be the finance person. So let's start going to market with assets for those people. And I think that piece of things in terms of like turning the corner from understanding your ideal customer to knowing what you're going to do with the definition that you provide becomes the really important point, because, you know, Chris mentioned this up front, like all we're really doing here is managing resources. And it's very, very easy to say, look at all the ways we can segment all of our ideal customer data to create 90 segments and do almost personalized communication to everybody. And then you look around and you say, well, I have a 3-person team and no real designer. So how am I going to get those 90 pieces done for all these different segments? And so like the purpose of doing all this work is to do something productive with it in your go-to-market motion, right? And you have to be able to build these things, you have to be able to manage them, and like theoretically they should be productive, right? So like you're doing this work to get to a point that becomes a balance of like my marginal effectiveness in moving people through this funnel and my ability to actually execute on the segmentation or the ICP work that I've done. And it would not be unusual, I think, for marketers to think about, look at all the segmentation I've done, and then find out that it's very difficult to actually resource what's required of the like in-depth data or segmentation work that they have thought through.
That's a good point. I think being pragmatic about how you actually execute a campaign towards a persona or an ICP can govern how complex you dig into it. I completely agree with that. You know, and with limited resources, you know, don't choose too many. But I think that also gets back to then choose the right one.
Yeah, because you can doesn't mean you should, right?
Put your bets right is I think what I'm hearing from both of you. But one of the reasons why you would want to, or why you know, our listeners who are listening in, who are often executives of startups and growth companies, why you want to do this work is because your customers may have distinctive need, and thereby may follow through. They may have your messaging, your sales and marketing messaging. You're moving them through the funnel. You might have to hold them differently. Some need trials, some need like demo accounts, some need sandboxes, some need, they may have different needs. And that's just even one stage. They may have a different need prior to that and after that. You know, there might be an onboarding team needed. They might be, you know, they're so advanced, once API handshake and done, right? So it's just that the whole idea of doing your ICP work is that your customers are not homogeneous, they're heterogeneous, they're different, and they may have different need. And this also helps you understand, where do you want to put your money on? Like you guys both are saying, focus and choose your 1-2. Would you say like, you know, 5-6 tops ICPs as you are thinking through? Because, you know, you mentioned 90, obviously it's not tenable. But for growth companies, think Series A, B, C, 5-6, is that what you guys would say?
Yeah, I mean, I think less is always better, to your point around focus. Like if man, some of the magic out there is with companies that can define a buying process with a single decision maker, right? That's ideal, right? But like rarely is that the case, right? So, I think you always want to default to, clear ICPs and then dig into like, what are the actual barriers you face in that process? Do you need multiple, approvers to get a decision made? People oftentimes take this into pricing where like, the reason we can't move forward at an enterprise level sale is because we're priced just above the signing authority line for our head of technology, and now it has to go to finance and it goes through a review. Well, like, do you let that get stuck in your process for another 6 months, or do you drop pricing to below the threshold so that you can sign off more quickly? So like the answer doesn't always have to be more segmentation, back to the strategy of that. But I think like start with the simplest versions of that, and then understand that you may need to break out, a sandbox account for folks or a trial account for others along the way. But I think it's important not to like, make those assumptions up front.
And this goes very nicely to, using ICPs more effectively, customization, personalization. What you're alluding to is, like not having, I don't know the benefits, pros and cons of not having standard contracts and doing your, ad hoc contracts with these different tiered customers. But how do you use ICPs effectively?
Do you want to jump into that one first?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the most important way to use them is to inspire the product team to deliver value quickly. For me, the right match is the right solution to the right buyer, and they're happy with it, and they get even happier with it post-purchase. And really understanding what drives that value and that embrace of the solution is where I think the best innovation comes from. Not that the ICP drives feature requests, not so much that, but really understanding where their pains are, what their use cases are. I think it can be the greatest source of innovation and real opportunity for growth companies to grow faster because they're delivering value to the same person. And so to me, the insight into what's driving the embrace of a product is where the most important thing is. But back to Devin's point about the 4 Ps, the other parts of that calculus is channel and pricing and how it's framed. And so the marketing communications function can also become just more effective. Campaigns are more interesting if you're talking about things that resonate with a human being. It's not just you're putting out different collateral and things like that, hoping for the best, but that this will land well. And so that's hard to do with too many ICPs. So the best thing for me is like you get an ICP or 2 or 3 that you really think can help you grow, and you use that to fuel those 4 Ps.
I love the internal view of that and like the use case, and something I always do to kind of challenge myself and team on ICPs or personas is like, once you build this criteria for the theoretical, company or person, like go find a real one. Show me someone that's a muse of this customer, right? Like give me an example with a website, or if we're talking personas, like find me someone on LinkedIn who meets the criteria that we've defined, so that we can almost put a face on the segmentation we've done and the criteria that we've built. And then it becomes much easier for the people who are doing this work on the product side or on a campaign build side to say, would this person respond to this message? Would they move through this process? Would they, are we building this in a way that we can effectively believe in laddering up to this individual? So yeah, I think that's again, this is all human at the end of the day.
Makes sense. So what I'm hearing is you both are talking about ICPs, building two ICPs, whether it's your collab, whether it's your offering, your handshakes, your experience, funnel experience, or post, building to your ICP specifically. And this reminds me of a story. I mean, back in PayPal, I was at PayPal long back, I don't know, a decade and a half ago. And we were looking at what used to be called P2P payments, it was a large segment which just grew for PayPal. But like, there's nothing you have to do, but people are just paying money through PayPal, sending money to each other. And we ended up segmenting, or at some point, we actually did a huge segmentation work on it. More largely it was B2C, so it's not in the context of B2B, but B2C, trying to figure out what are the different use cases, who is paying who for what, right? What are the use cases? We ended up, it was a really, I mean, it's much further down for PayPal, and by that time, it's not Series ABC or like much further down, but we ended up finding 23 segments. One of the big ones, and a lot of those 23 segments actually informed product features. So for example, recurring payment didn't exist as a feature. It came out of our work from the analytics team saying, X% of these transactions are recurring, same sender, same receiver, and has a set interval. It's every 2 weeks or something like that. And that's how the recurring feature came. And many other features came from that. So once you know your ICPs and you know what they're doing and why they're doing it, it's the same person paying their gardener or whatever that use case was, or paying rent, and so on. That's how you start developing kind of, now it might inform your product, not only just your marketing and sales funnel, but it actually might inform your product and feature because of something specifically about them. So I'm going to go back, and I think these ICP conversations are great, but I'm going to go back to bottom of the funnel, because that's where the rubber hits the road. We all love the bottom of the funnel. And it's the hardest problem to solve. There are prospects and leads and opportunities which stay in the funnel forever, waste our time, and they don't convert. There are opportunities which come in and out. They just exit, just like you're not the right solution, whatever. It's very frustrating. The bottom funnel is, it's where it's an opportunity for greatest euphoria and, greatest disappointment. So what are the strategies that you guys have seen, how to optimize that bottom of the funnel? What works, what doesn't?
If in a B2B environment where, oftentimes your success, like the end of the marketing funnel is the start of a sales funnel, right? And that handoff point is oftentimes where things are leaky, right? We're hitting our MQL goal from a marketing team perspective, and sales is saying all these leads aren't good enough, right? That's often the leakiest point. I'm a big fan of kind of overlapping KPIs. Marketing's not successful without sales success, and sales isn't successful without marketing's, and there being some healthy competition there. And oftentimes I work backwards from, and I spend a lot of time listening to first touch or qualification calls from leads that have flown through marketing. And what I'm looking for there is, at this leaky point in the funnel, what are the questions that are having to be discussed or talked through on the sales side? And every question that's asked in a first touch sales conversation is something that marketing hasn't answered beforehand. Mm-hmm. Right? And so the way we make that funnel less leaky is we better educate the people that are moving through it. And that becomes things we have to build content around, or things that we include on landing pages to help kind of look to make that handoff more smooth. And I kind of challenge our team to say, can we help a salesperson start their conversation 3 minutes, 5 minutes deeper than they would have otherwise, because that prospect is better educated in that process, right? So like, can we better prepare them to have a conversation downstream in a way that like smooths over some of those leaks or disqualifies somebody that shouldn't have been there in the first place because we were able to answer one of those first questions in a way that didn't take up the time of scheduling a call.
I like it. I think I love the overlapping KPIs and the tension there. There's a book written by, I think the same guys who wrote sort of the Challenger Mindset, called Jolt, which addresses the sales process and why the funnel slows down and gets sometimes worse at the bottom. And that is, you don't change to a new product unless you think there is a problem. So you need to be challenged. Your status quo needs to be challenged. But once you've made the decision to go consider a new option, many people become indecisive because it feels very risky to change. And so you go from this moment of needing to be persuaded to change to needing to feel comfortable to actually follow through with the decision. And from a marketing, and so it's usually like a salesperson has to manage that process, and many manage it poorly because they think more information, more different kinds of options are the things that you should keep offering because it seems like a gift, when in fact it's the very thing that removes that decider's ability to focus and narrow and feel comfortable. And so this was an interesting thing for us to sort of consider, which is like, you have to make your offer very clear. Like, what exactly are you buying? Like, make it simple for them to imagine getting it, which I think I've been part of a process where you're like, well, we can do lots of things. And you're like, that's like that whole concept that it's not clear makes it hard for them to buy. You limit their options, like you position yourself next to only a couple other things so that it's easy to see why you versus one other thing. If it's that sort of like supermarket aisle of options, they'll just balk. And then you also have to then, de-risk your side. It's like, how do you make your company trustworthy? Which is often someone who's not on the champion. It's that other buyer, that other person who weighs in from, the CFO's office. Like, is this company legitimate, or whatever the factor is? So you have to make buying you seem like it's not a risky bet. Those things I think are like go against the way marketers traditionally add more information along the way, and it's not always helpful. I found it to be a useful sort of thing to challenge myself because I've been very guilty of, let's do another webinar, invite them to another topic to show them how smart we are. And you're like, sometimes those things like really throw them off in the wrong direction.
So focused, what I'm hearing is focused and
at ease.
Sorry?
Put them at ease. Simplify.
Yeah, simplify. I think that might be the theme that we are all talking about throughout here, simplify and focused. And then you also talked about trust and appearing, and that's, I think business is done on handshake still. Part of our brain is still wired for that trust, of course. So we do business with people we trust, and we do pretty much everything with somebody we trust, whether even if it's a transaction or not. Those are good points. So I think, Devin, one you were talking about the sales, marketing and sales coming in. Do you have any further thoughts to what Chris is talking about at the bottom of the sales funnel? I'm talking about closest to sales, close one.
Yeah, and I think to some of the points that he made, and also a big fan of Joel if you're struggling with the bottom of the sales funnel, but a fairly successful salesperson told me once that you open with emotion and you close with data. And so when you think about the kinds of things that you're building content around and where they fit in the funnel, oftentimes the things at the top of your funnel, the subject lines of your emails, the topics of your webinars, are very hopeful and inspirational things. And by the time you get to, some of the objections that Chris brought up, like, is this a trustworthy company? Like, do we believe the ROI is going to be there on this investment? Are much more like data-driven, CFO, gatekeeper type questions. And just keeping that in mind, that like, all the way back to our very beginning of the conversation here, when you work backwards from closed one, if you try to take that like ROI, we're a trustworthy company data point from like the very bottom of the funnel and use that at the top, it's probably not going to be very successful. And if you try to do the opposite and put your inspirational, topics in your closing content, it's also probably not going to be very successful. So, understanding what people are looking for and how your audience changes throughout that time becomes really important. And where that sales and marketing handoff is along the way is going to be different for everyone. But I think that continuum is largely, true universally.
That's great. I'm gonna take that point home. Open with emotions, close with data. This is great. So we are at the end of our hour. I'm gonna ask each of you to kind of zoom out and give 3 tips to our listeners. If you were you were whispering into an executive's ear on sales and marketing funnel, what would be your top 3 things that you would say to them? 3 key takeaways. And Chris, we'll start with you.
The first thing I would say is be curious about the buyer. Don't just focus on your data or your team, but focus on who the people who are going through the funnel. The second thing I would say is experiment, especially in this world of AI and other innovations. Things that worked even 18 months ago may not work going forward. So don't believe you have it figured out. Keep experimenting. And the third thing I would say is, create a collaborative environment with your team. Make sure that your sales team, your product team, your customer success team, everybody's collaborating. It's all one team at the end who wins. Customers buy from one company. They don't know what department you're in. And so the more collaborative you can be, the better.
That's great. Devin?
Yeah, I'll steal Chris's last one as my first. Marketing's probably the most cross-functional department in most organizations, right? So like you have to be fostering a collaborative kind of marketing environment, because the reason someone's moving through a funnel or not is likely probably not just a marketing issue, right? So while a lot of other teams may be able to kind of stay in their silo and be effective, marketing probably cannot. The next would probably be to put everything into context, right? You spend a lot of time as a person inside an organization looking at your data and understanding how maybe things compare to your competitors or to other industries to help see a broader picture. It's very easy to spend too much time with your own folks. And then I think the last piece becomes be very clear about the subsequent work that comes out of the segmentation that you're doing. And, maybe this is a scar from personalization some time back, but every step that you go deeper is another action or activity that has to be messaged, it has to be built, it has to be managed, it has to be tracked. And so while everybody likes to think that we can get to personalization for everybody, marketing is fundamentally like sales at scale. And if you can't do it with some scale, it's not marketing, it's probably a sales activity. And so, when you think about balancing resources and being effective, back to one of the first things we talked about, I think that's probably one of the biggest buzzwords that we oftentimes have to push back on. Is because we can segment that way, it doesn't mean we actually should be operating that way.
And my 3 takeaways, which I'm going to re-quote you guys: put yourself between prospect and process, open with emotion, close with data, and marketing is sales at scale. Again, I have taken notes, but these are 3 things I have kind of mnemonics that I'm taking home for myself. So this is great. Thank you so much, Chris and Devin, to be here, for being here. It was awesome. And to all the listeners now or in future, thank you for listening in.
Thank you so much. Take care.